There have been quite a few interesting horror releases of late, and Bagman can be added to the list of these intriguing projects. Fear is often the strongest when it is developed across generations through folklore and local myths and legends. This movie dwells on this concept, and brings up an antagonist that's straight up from your nightmares. The titular Bagman is an infamous entity of evil that takes away kids after having them chained up inside bags. And whether or not he's real, you're about to find out as we dive into the movie narrative in this video. There will be some major spoilers along the way, so you've been warned. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. How does the movie introduce Bagman as a mythical monster? Don't we all love a horror flick that gets straight to the point? Well, Bagman hits a home run in this department, and the narrative doesn't even try to beat around the bush. The very first scene introduces us to a father-daughter duo who are having a conversation about some of the difficulties that the young girl has been facing of late. She reveals that she was riding her cycle during a storm and got really freaked out, so much so that she had to resort to one of her childhood stuffed bunnies for comfort. The father tries to talk her out of her irrational fear, and almost convinces her to discard the bunny. However, there's a sudden twist as a strange apparition appears in the dark and disfigures the father. He watches helplessly as the daughter is taken away in a bag, probably by the infamous Bagman. Could we get a better introduction to the terrifying evil entity? Probably not. What happens when the Bagman threats haunt the McKee family? After the shocking opening sequence, we're brought back to the actual story, and we're introduced to the McKee family. Patrick is an aspiring entrepreneur, and he has come up with a design that can develop a state-of-the-art tree trimmer. However, the banks are not too supportive of his ambitious project, and he's required to cut the production cost in half if he's to make any progress. It doesn't help his cause that he's a married man and lives with his wife Karina and toddler son Jake. Even with the financial burdens that weigh him down, Patrick tries his best to be the perfect family man, and he's a loving and protective father. In order to help him out, his brother Liam offers him to come back and work for him at their family lumberyard. A reluctant Patrick is forced to give in because he has a family to sustain, and the pending bills are rising uncontrollably. He settles into their old house, where he lived with his brother as a kid, and his settling in period is soon troubled by some disturbing events. He starts to hear strange noises outside, and the surrounding woods and thick vegetation make it impossible for him to have a clear line of sight. Initially, his brother tries to comfort him by suggesting that the noises and voices that he hears are probably from drunk teenagers partying secretly in the surrounding woods, or even a possum or raccoon, but Patrick is not convinced. He recollects his childhood days when this region infamously knew about the Bagman lore. For generations, the warning has been passed on to the young ones, and even Patrick's own father told him about the evil Bagman. This evil entity, he claimed, hunted for young ones, and he preferred to pick among the good children and the thinkers. He fed on their fear and started by chopping off a part of their hair or taking away their favorite item to keep track of them. There was an abandoned mine nearby, where Patrick and his brother Liam were forbidden from going. During one of his misadventures, Patrick had ventured into the mine opening, lured by a soft oak tree which he could carve. He had the hobby of carving out various things from wood, and this tree was far too tempting for him. However, something or someone snuck up on him from behind and seems to have chopped off a lock of his hair. A startled Patrick returned home only to be warned by his father about the Bagman, who allegedly took children away in his vile duffel bag and zipped them tightly inside. Of course, there was no real evidence about the presence of the Bagman, but Patrick grew up amidst all these rumors, and the entire saga became a childhood trauma for him that he could never fully recover from. Now, back in the present day, something seems to be haunting his family, and slowly, Patrick starts to believe that the Bagman threat might have been real after all. The evil incarnate seems to be after his young son Jake, and Patrick becomes all the more protective of the toddler, now that he knows that a threat from his childhood is back to haunt him one more time. Is Bagman real, or is it all in his mind? We get glimpses of the Bagman every now and then, but there's always the lingering question about whether he's even real, or is it all a figment of Patrick's wild imagination? He's burdened by a lot of stress and financial uncertainty, and such crises can easily bring back traumatic memories from childhood and manifest them in various forms. However, as the narrative moves ahead, we become more and more convinced that Bagman is more than just a part of Patrick's imagination running wild. On a few occasions, he finds himself waking up to strange noises, but every time he goes to explore the house and the surroundings, he finds nothing conclusive. His wife Karina also has a terrifying experience when she's busy working and the toddler Jake wanders off into the woods all by himself. Unbeknownst to her, he's actually tempted by the apparition of a young girl who calls out to him. Also, it's worth noting that Jake has a wooden flute that he cannot get enough of. He keeps playing it all the time, and it is easily his favorite toy, much to the annoyance of his mother, who wants Patrick to hide the flute away. After another restless night, where Patrick wakes up suspecting a break-in, they summon the cops and their security services, but the investigations do not reveal anything worthwhile. Nothing from the house is stolen or missing, and all the investigators find are some of Patrick's old carved items, which were used to throw towards Jake's window in order to draw his attention. Of course, Patrick cannot go ahead with the whole Bagman theory, and he keeps it to himself. The only noticeable item missing is his son's flute, and Patrick cannot find it anywhere in the house or even the trash bags. Later, when he discusses his concerns with his brother, Liam suggests that he needs to go back to his shrink Barbara, who helped him recover back in the day. He goes ahead with this suggestion, and he takes his wife Karina along with him. The therapist tries to convince the couple that it's quite natural as a trauma response, and even Karina is shocked to find out about the haunting experiences of her husband as a child. She even suggests they move out of the house briefly, and Karina's sister books them a hotel room for a quick getaway. She even offers to babysit Jake, and it almost seems like things are alright, even though the respite is rather brief. Karina's sister lives in a secure apartment complex, where every floor is monitored by a security guard through the CCTV cameras. However, all of a sudden, there seems to be something wrong with the baby monitor, and she hears some strange sounds. The next moment, the power starts to flicker abnormally before going out, and she finds out that Bagman is at her door, trying to unlock it from the outside. She takes Jake and hides into the closet, but Bagman tracks her down soon enough. By the time Patrick and Karina return, they're horrified to find cops at the site, and luckily, Karina's sister is only mildly injured and extremely traumatized. The security guard apparently noticed the anomaly and went to check, and the commotion caused the Bagman to escape without Jake. Now, the cops take the intrusion very seriously, and they're convinced that someone or some people are after the McKee family. They allowed a police posting outside their house, and assure them that the sick freak will be nabbed soon enough. How does Patrick's final showdown with Bagman take place? Ending explained. The climactic moments of the movie are just as tense as things began, and Patrick is now sure that all of this is Bagman's doing. While speaking with him, the cops even show him the records where a disfigured father watched his daughter being taken away in a bag by a freak, and this is a throwback to the opening sequence. Patrick is all the more watchful, but one simply cannot keep the inevitable evil away forever. There's one crucial little detail about Bagman that we missed out on sharing. He can reach his prey at any moment if he possesses their hair locks or loved items, but he's weak against a child's love for things, and that's the only way to deter him. Back in the day, Patrick was told about this by his father, who asked him to keep his most cherished tool, a carving knife, close to his heart for protection from the Bagman. During his financial troubles and frustrations, Patrick lost sight of this advice and broke his knife, and even his son Jake had lost his beloved flute. Finally, the Bagman strikes one last time, and this time he's quicker than Patrick's intervention. The cop on guard is killed, and he takes Jake away inside his bag. But Patrick is a spirited father, and not someone to give up. He chases the Bagman, and ends up following him into his lair. This is the same mine opening where Patrick's hair was cut off by the Bagman when he dared to venture too close as a child. Patrick storms into the Bagman's secret lair, and he hears the cries and mumblings of his son Jake. Soon, he comes across a giant hallway that's stocked with various items that belong to kids. We see the stuffed bunny that belonged to the little girl, and many other such items that are dear to the kids. All these kids have been taken by the Bagman, and separating them from their loved ones made them all vulnerable. He even finds Jake's flute and manages to throw it outside the Bagman's lair. At this point, Patrick realizes that the Bagman might still be after him, and not his son Jake, and he calls out to the vile entity to show himself. Bagman takes up the challenge, and back in his home, we see his wife Karina find Jake in his crib. Did the Bagman give up on the toddler to secure his prized target Patrick? The final moments are rather anticlimactic because Patrick is no match for the insane powers of the Bagman. He's almost paralyzed and helpless as the Bagman toys with him, before stuffing him into his ridiculously giant bag and zipping it shut. Patrick does manage to reveal Bagman's rotting face one time, by removing his hoodie or veil-like covering. It seems like he's finally sacrificed himself to save his son, and later the cops search the region in vain. There's no trace of Patrick anywhere, and all they find is Jake's flute, and it's given back to the happy toddler. Karina decides to leave with her son because it would be impossible to live there without her husband around. The movie ends as she asks Jake to keep the flute close, because just like Patrick's father had advised, there's nothing stronger than a child's love for his favorite thing. Bagman anatomy explored. Is he an undead entity? The titular antagonist is quite a spectacle, and the presence of Bagman is what makes the movie watchable despite its flaws. Various cultures have a similar lore about a creature or entity, like the Bagman, who takes away children, and this is even pointed out by the shrink Barbara during Patrick's session. Bagman is a part of this local lore, and he turns out to be just as real as darkness. His appearance is quite intimidating, even though he stands tall, at about Patrick's height, which is about the average human height. For most of the movie, the upper part of his face is hidden behind a veil, and all we get to see are his crooked and rotten teeth. We also get glimpses of his rotting hands with unusually long fingers that have sharp nails on them. In the final moments of the film, his face is revealed and we see a gaping hole in his skull. He appears to be an old man who has clearly been dead for centuries, as the legend suggests. His skin is suitably pale and rotting, and it could probably be that he takes the kids away to suck away their life force. For this reason, he picks the most lively and creative kids, and instead of the conventional naughty children, he picks the good ones. Is Bagman similar to Pennywise? How can he be defeated? The resemblance between the Bagman and Pennywise is hard to miss, especially because both of these evil entities are notorious for snatching children up. Both of them prey upon the fear of their victims, and they target and pick their prey accordingly. Bagman has several superpowers, but he does have a major weakness that can be used against him. If a kid keeps his most loved item close to him at all times, it almost becomes like a shield that Bagman cannot penetrate. This helped Patrick stay clear of him all these years. And finally, Jake's flute is what saves him. Patrick's father also pointed out that if the Bagman is repelled long enough, he can be weakened enough and destroyed. But we don't see that happening in the movie because he always has a steady supply of victims. We're also curious about what happens if someone doesn't fear the Bagman at all, since it essentially preys upon the scared victims who fall easily. However, even if we consider his weaknesses, it's worth noting that one can only stay away from the Bagman or keep him away, but there's no definite way to destroy him permanently. How do you kill what's already dead? Overall, the Bagman does seem an awful lot like a Stephen King creation because of his similarities with some of his other famous works. What are the superpowers that Bagman possesses? Bagman is incredibly powerful in the movie, and as a paranormal entity, he has certain abilities that no human can match up to. He clearly has superior physical strength, which allows him to toy with adult humans, like their helpless playthings. The Bagman is also a master of stealth, and he can move around without making the slightest of sounds. It's also worth noting that the Bagman has shown signs of shape-shifting, and he's been seen blending into a tree to avoid detection. He's an undead entity himself, and there's a chance that he can also make the children he captures do his bidding. One of the little undead girls that he uses to lure Jake outside the house is probably one of his earlier victims. Of course, the most important superpower possessed by the Bagman is his indestructible nature and how he has existed through generations, tormenting and abducting children. Is there going to be a sequel to Bagman? The climax of the movie is not exactly open-ended, but it does leave plenty of room for a sequel to be conjured up. For starters, Bagman is still out there and he's taken Patrick away, but we haven't seen him kill Patrick. Meanwhile, his other target, the young toddler Jake and his mother, are also in the picture, and we cannot rule out Bagman coming back for the kid. If Patrick manages to escape from Bagman's captivity, he can live to fight another day, and there might be another showdown between the two as Patrick tries to protect his son. The only concern regarding the sequel is that the movie has not exactly set the box office on fire. A poor financial showing might tempt the makers to abandon the ideas of a sequel. Marvelous verdict. A better execution would have made Bagman a whole lot better. We could heap praises on Bagman, but that wouldn't be a fair review because the movie has loads of issues that it could have handled better. We expect a lot more from a director like Colm McCarthy, who has worked in acclaimed projects like Peaky Blinders and various episodes of Doctor Who. This movie is ostensibly a horror flick, but the fear factor is hardly appealing to the adult audience. There are a few genuine jump scares, and the concept of the Bagman as an evil entity is quite intriguing, but these simply aren't enough to save the day. The acting performances are decent, and the other saving grace for the movie is the fast-paced narrative and short runtime. All in all, it's worth a one-time watch, but if the execution was handled better, it could have been a horror flick that you would remember for quite some time. Do let us know in the comments below about your thoughts on the movie, and also share with us your take on the Bagman and his purpose behind abducting children in duffel bags. If you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks, everyone!